Okay, hello YouTube. Today we're going to be continuing our exploration of the Najdorf Sicilian after e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, cd4, knight d4, knight c6, knight c3, and then a6. And we're going to be exclusively exploring the moves with bishop e2, and we're going to be responding to bishop e2 with e5. Now, if you like content like this and you want to see more of it, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button and click on your notification icon. Now, I did previously discuss, when I was talking about how to play against, instead of bishop e2, how to play against f4, I was discussing how the early f4 in these positions isn't all that great for white. Like, even if white retreats right here with knight to b3, bishop e7, after castles, castles, if white were to play an early f4, black would actually be doing pretty well after pawn to b5. For one thing, this pawn can't move backwards. It can't go from f4 back to f3. Now, when you're playing against kind of the more sophisticated crowd or the people that know what they're doing, what they're going to generally do is they're not going to play f4 right away. They're going to refrain from this until it actually makes more sense, or they're going to try to simply restrict black's position, and that's generally speaking how white plays this position, is they try to restrict black from making progress. So one of the more annoying moves just up front is just to play against the move pawn to a4, because against just about anything else, what we're going to inevitably do is we're going to try, like for example, if king h1, getting the king out of the way for eventually f4, we're going to be expanding pretty much right away with the move pawn to b5. There was a game, Alexenko versus Magnus Carlsen, played in 2019, that continued a4, bishop b7, knight d5, b4, knight f6, bishop f6, f3, queen c7. And of course, as you can see here, Carlsen is just having zero problems with the black pieces. He's doing what Carlsen does, just improving his position and, just generally speaking, having a good game. Black is doing great here. If anybody's better in this position, it's probably black at this point. So, in general, like, when we get this early queenside expansion and we get easy play, it's not terribly difficult to improve our position from here. So, that's really the move that I would recommend against a lot of moves. Against king h1, against just about any number of tries. Rook e1 is another very common move. Here, we could take a look at Najir versus Karyakin, continued bishop e6, bishop f3, queen c7, a4, and we're actually going to get something very similar to if they play a4 right away. In this case, it continued rook c8, a5, knight and b to d7, knight d2, and then eventually b5. So here's another little secret, is when they play this a4 to restrict your position, and especially when they play a4, a5, a lot of times what we'll do is we'll end up just playing b5 anyway. They'll waste all this tempo with a4, a5, and then we'll still play b5, and when we take back with the knight, what we're doing is we're focusing our energy on getting in this pawn push pawn to d5. Now, in general, in the Najdorf Sicilian and in the classical variation, when we get in this pawn push pawn to d5, black has completely equalized. That's a lot of times why you see these maneuvers with stuff like bishop e2, f3, because they're really trying to clamp down on this d5 square. And in the classical variation in general, they're trying to clamp down on the d5 square. White wants to turn this d5 square into a major transfer point for himself, and black wants to simply control this square so he can push d5 at some point. And that's basically the strategy that white employs in the classical variation, is the kind of this endless attempt to control black from making progress. And different variations give varying degrees of success. So after knight b6, this game continued with black managing to make some progress, and then eventually a bunch of exchanges happened on the d5 square, and this mostly just favors black, because now this pawn is no longer a weakness, but more importantly, there's actually a tactic here that makes black's position completely make sense. He's forking, and white has to recapture, and then after queen captures b2, there's a weakness on c4, and, black just ended up being clearly better. So that was an example of what to do against rook e1. Another move that gets played quite a bit is something like bishop e3. So we can play bishop e3, and then we can play bishop e6. Now, one of the issues here is if they do decide to play this move, for example, pawn to f4 in these situations, what we're going to run into is we're going to run into this immediate e takes f4. The idea being is that we have these kind of corresponding weaknesses here. After ef4 and then after bishop f4, each side has the same number of weaknesses. We have a weakness on d6 versus this weakness on e4. And white has wasted this tempo, bishop to e3, and then bishop to f4. Now, this doesn't change the fact that this line is actually very topical, and that this line should be considered approximately level. Black has equalized very easily, but at this point, white doesn't really have much of an advantage, but at the same time, neither does black. And this position is probably, I think, the way almost white should go in these cases, because other lines it feels like maybe white's trying a little too hard to restrict all of black's options. So bishop e3 I think is maybe the best shot for white, and I think those positions are approximately level. We're just going to play something like bishop e3, and then after the pawn goes to f4, we're going to exchange with black. We're going to play knight c6, and then those positions are approximately level. But again, going back to a4, this is one of the more scary options that we have to deal with. How exactly do we face pawn to a4? So we should just play bishop e6, bishop f3, knight on b to d7, a5, and we're going to see, again, the exact same idea, queen c7, bishop e3, and here we can play either h6 is totally acceptable, rook fc8, h3, and then b5 with the exact same idea as we saw previously, and this is fine for black. We can go down a slightly different path if we want. We don't need h6. We could play here and play something like this, which is ostensibly pretty similar, but here black is just kind of maneuvering for more of a kingside attack, and this apparently worked out in Eroshenko versus Sodenko, played in the Ukraine in 2021, so played pretty recently. So this was knight f3, queen f3, then d5, and black managed to completely equalize with his little knight dance. So that's another option. I'm more of a traditionalist, so I kind of just prefer going after this early h6 and just play for b5, and this position should be completely equal. I think, like, really in these positions, like, my opinion is, I've never really understood the classical variation for white. Like, I never really understood what white was after. Again, if I were to play it, I would play just like an early bishop e3 followed by pawn to f4, and I'd be totally happy with just exchanging and just me playing for the weakness on d6 and black playing for the weakness on e4, and for the development to be approximately level with an approximately level position. These positions where white has slightly more space, and oftentimes the computer will even give like an eval of, advantage white, never made a whole lot of sense to me, just because I feel like black is the only one really playing for an active plan. Black is trying to expand on the queen side, black is trying to eventually thrust in the middle with a move like pawn to d5, and meanwhile all white is doing is trying to just kind of hold black back and try to keep black from making any real progress. But in the end, I think that black can make progress. It's not easy for white to shut black down, and I think black will inevitably be okay. And I think that all these positions are just going to be like roundabout level, but once black gets in his freeing maneuvers, if anybody's going to be better in these positions, it's going to be black. So that's basically how we play against the classical variation of the Sicilian. And I hope that you found these ideas helpful. I hope you learned something new about chess, and I hope you can use some of these ideas in your own games. Thank you very much for watching.